This is the place of the explosion, the Asturian mine of Chirredo, in the Council of Dega. After 9:30 in the morning, 112 receives the warning. An explosion inside a coal mine on the third floor. Emergency personnel are moving there. The situation is very serious. There are operators trapped several meters deep. The rescue tasks begin, and the worst forecasts are confirmed. There are deceased workers. With the passing of the hours, the figure rises to 5. They were between 32 and 54 years old, and were from the province of Leon. There are also 4 other injured with burns and traumatisms, 2 transferred to Leonese hospitals, and another to Cangas del Narcia. 2 more miners have been unharmed. Government delegation confirms that there is no one left inside the mine. The causes of the fatal accident are being investigated. Apparently, a machine they were working with in one of the galleries had exploded, causing a collapse. The Principality of Asturias has declared 2 days of official mourning to demand an exhaustive clarification of what happened. The exhaustive verification, also that there are sufficient risk prevention protocols, and to know exactly what happened, in order to take preventive measures so that it does not happen again.
His name was Fernando Freid. He was 27 years old and was, until today, the last victim of a mining accident in Asturias. It happened in Cangas del Narcia in 2016. At midnight, a dynamite explosion in the rubble of a mountain mine, Anthracites del Acebo.
He was outside in the dump by himself, and the shift was inside the mine like this.
5,000 employees in more than 8,000 accidents is the figure that collects the number of victims. In the history of Asturian mining, the majority caused by El Gris. Of all of them, one of the most serious occurred in the early morning of the 31st of August, 1995, 14 dead in Mears in the Nicolasa well.
Not only solidarity with the families of the deceased miners, but also respect and remembrance for the very people who today left their lives at the bottom of the well.
And there was another one with more deaths. It was in 1949, and it was narrated by the song, Blessed Saint Barbara. An explosion killed 17 other workers. It was also the Grey. The words of Mara S. Montero on the acquittal of Dani Alves. What a shame! The sentence of Dani Alves, they are unacceptable and shameful, according to the PP and Vox, who demand his resignation.
It is especially serious for a vice president of the government to question, attack, and disparage the presumption of innocence, which is a fundamental constitutional principle. Don't leave her, Montero. The shame is that they are in the government, destroying the presumption of innocence.
Today, in a message, Montero clarifies what he meant and maintains is that the presumption of innocence cannot prevent the rejection of those who question the victims from being expressed. The so believes that although it could have been said differently, they are words that are the result of impotence. This is opinionable. It is also a question of freedom of expression. It is a sentence that is difficult to digest, and the associations of conservative and progressive judges and prosecutors ask Montero for institutional responsibility and respect for judicial independence and the presumption of innocence. Repsol hopes to reach some agreement with the United States after the veto on its business. Its CEO acknowledges that the ups and downs are part of the activity in the country, but that he maintains an open and fluid dialogue with the Trump administration.
We are in direct contact with the American authorities, and we are going to see if we are able to find mechanisms that can allow us to continue our activity in this country.
The oil company insists that it complies with international legislation after recalling that the current licenses were granted last year during the Biden administration. Repsol has been working in Venezuela for 32 years, and 85% of its business there is natural gas and not oil. In 2024, it produced an average of 67 million barrels per day, and now it is worth more than €500 million. The government is calling for calm.
We are going to use all the space we have for dialogue. And at the same time, of course, what I have transferred is that the government of Spain is on the side of Repsol.
Something they agree on from the PP.
Let's be careful with Repsol. Okay. And we are going to defend our interests, but within prudence.
In the last year, Spain has imported 3 million tons of Venezuelan oil. If the situation does not change, Repsol has 2 months to terminate all contracts that export oil from Venezuela. Podemos ignores Yolanda Díaz's call for unity. The formation of the vice president turned this weekend into a conventional party, making a call to rebuild the electoral alliance of 23J, but the purple ones do not seem to be for the job. They say that the future of the left passes through living projects, and they label the 12 left Sumer movement, that when you don't have that autonomy, we already see what happens. And today we have a government in which only Pedro Sánchez is in charge. What we find is a government that could do the same public policies that the Popular Party would do.
The advancement of private centers that place business above quality, without rigor and without scruples. Those beach bars that do not meet the level that should be required of our higher education, damaging the whole system.
The plan will be approved tomorrow at the Council of Ministers and will be processed urgently. He said this at the UND, where he announced that 30 million euros will be allocated to relaunch the distance learning university. Sánchez has accused Madrid and Andalusia of cutting back on public higher education to favor private schools.
That nothing in Ukraine is alien to Europe is the message that the foreign ministers of the so-called G5+ have wanted to convey. Perhaps aware that the most geographically distant countries are now seeing the ears of the wolf less. Putin's aggression is not only a problem for the eastern flank, the Polish minister has stressed. An idea shared by the High Representative for Foreign Affairs of the EU, Kaja Kallas, during an interview with Television Española. If the war expands, it will be a problem for everyone because, he said, by looking at the map, it is clear that Europe is very small. That is why he insists on the need to provide Ukraine with more military aid urgently.
The battlefield, the stronger they are behind the negotiation table.
The stronger they are on the battlefield, the stronger they will be at the negotiating table, he says. The Spanish minister Alvarez opens the door to considering new sources where to get that money. It is legitimate to consider the situation of frozen Russian assets, whose interests are already being used to help Ukraine. His French counterpart stresses that only the will is lacking. And remember that if we want peace, we must deter those who threaten it with force.
After a week of searching, the bodies of 14 humanitarian workers from the Red Crescent, Gaza Civil Protection, and an employee have been found. There's still one missing. The bodies were buried under the sand in Rafah, in southern Gaza. Here we see the UN teams and several rescuers who have accessed the area to recover them. Until now, it was prevented by Israeli soldiers. Healthcare workers should never be targeted. They were here to save lives and ended up in a mass grave, denounces one of the humanitarian aid chiefs. The Israeli army has confirmed that it attacked the convoy last week because it considered the vehicles to be suspicious, but they were ambulances and a fire truck clearly identified and attending an emergency after a bombing. They ended up being the victims of an attack themselves. According to the UN, the Israeli forces also buried the emergency vehicles, perhaps to hide what happened. The Red Crescent in a statement says it is devastated by the murder of its workers. He has called the deaths war crimes and demands an investigation to hold those responsible accountable. 1,060 humanitarian workers have been killed since the beginning of the war in Gaza.
Marine Le Pen's sights are now set on her political survival, not on the Elysee. The conviction takes her away from a presidency that she already saw as close. The leader of the French far-right was leading all the polls in the first and second rounds. The French press agreed these days that two constitutional requirements should be combined: the honesty of the candidates and the sovereignty of the voters to decide who governs them. And even Prime Minister Bayrou acknowledged that the disqualification would come as a shock to public opinion. It's not just an unjust sentence, they are executing democracy, says the president of Le Pen's party. Jordan Bardella is now the plan B of Le Pen's party for the elections of 2027. With Bardella, the far right won the European elections last year with almost 1 in 3 votes. In Europe, the Hungarian Orban publishes his support for Le Pen, and the Russian government, with whom they have linked the French ultras, considers the conviction a violation of democratic norms. In Spain, it is supported by Vox. One more time, right. He's going to be chasing the alternatives. They want my political death, Marine Le Pen said of this process. For now, the lunge leaves his ambitions frozen.